Hello, and welcome to this beginner introduction to Adobe Illustrator and digitizing. Okay, so very first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open Adobe Illustrator CS5, which is the version that we're currently using for all of our digitizing work. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. So when you open it up, you're going to see something like this. If you are in the store, this will usually be saved for you, but if for any reason it's not, it's UA Embroidery. The username is capswag and the password is blue team. And I'm just going to click remember password and auto select server and click OK. That's just for me to set it up. So as soon as it's done loading, cool. So now we're opening up Illustrator. That little intro step was just so the embroidery plugin works for us, and the embroidery plugin actually connects to an external server, so that's why you saw that. Okay, just gonna skip that and open it up. Okay, great. So pretty much it's gonna be pretty straightforward when you do it on the computer, but this is the bare bones of what you're gonna see. On the left here we have some tools. On the right here we have some more options like color, gray, and different things like that. But to begin digitizing or even working in Illustrator, we have to make a new project. So let's do new. Title's pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to call this basic digitizing tutorial. Okay. This is the document type doesn't really matter unless you're doing some kind of other Illustrator work, but for digitizing it doesn't matter. Your size of the actual artboard doesn't really matter either, since you're going to play with the size, but just to have something to work with, I'm just going to make it 15 by 15. Again, that's not really important unless you want to structure your size like on the template a certain way. Alright, so we're going to click OK. Cool. So right here, you see this is our artboard, and you see here basic digitizing tutorial. So, okay, how do we start? Well, we actually didn't activate our digitizing tools yet. So we want to go to Window and make sure that all the important i2 plugin windows are turned on. So let's go ahead and make sure that we can see all of them. And these will probably be already arranged for you if you're on a store computer, but just in case for any reason you don't see them, that's how you do that. Just in case you missed it, you go to Window and you just make sure all the Embroidery i2 things are checked off. Okay. A couple of other things I like to have are Navigator. Actually, no, sorry, not Navigator. I like to have Pathfinder, because it's useful when doing sometimes vector work, and you might see that a little later. Layers is important because a lot of times you want to work in separate layers to get the product that you're looking for in terms of design. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. I think that might be, oh, align. That's pretty useful too. That comes in handy when you're trying to center things. And I think there's one more. Just let me info. This is a useful tool also. It tells you the position your mouse is. You see the X and Y is moving, and it also, when you do a measurement later on, your measurement values will come out here. So that's also a useful tool to have. I'm trying to find, I have one more that I actually am looking for though. Just to make sure we cover everything. Layers, gradient, partner. Could it be appearance maybe? No, not appearance. I think this is it. Okay, well, this is good enough. Let me just double check. I think this is good enough for what we're going to do today. But that's how you open up all these windows, is you go to Window tab and you just make sure it's checked off whatever you need. There's more here that I don't really use, but if for any reason we'll be using some of these tools later on, you can definitely just come in here and activate them for yourself. Okay, so let's go through this just one more time, what each of these windows actually does. So this is info again, we already covered that. This helps you align things. So here I selected the square tool. I'm going to make a square, and I did that by clicking and dragging. Let's say I'm going to make two random shapes, okay? And let's say I want to align them a certain way on the page. To select objects, you use the selection tool. So I click here, or you could press V on the keyboard as a shortcut. When you're trying to work fast, that's pretty helpful. So what you do is you click and drag, you select the two objects, and you have a couple of different settings. Yeah, basically you can do a horizontal line like that. You can do a horizontal left align like that. You could, I'm going to move this one over here. If you wanted to have them like on the same bottom aligned, you could do it like that, like vertical align bottom. You could space them out a certain way, or even, so what I'm doing right now is I'm actually aligning them in relation to the selection, but I can do it in relation to the artboard, which is this 15 by 15 square that we made in the beginning when we set up our template. So if I select these two and I align them to the center, it aligns them to the center of the actual page. And let's say I want to do the horizontal center too, you see it'll put them dead center. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need to know with that. I'm just trying to move this over here. Okay, cool. So this Pathfinder helps you do all kinds of modifications to your shape. So let's say I put this here. So remember, these are two separate shapes, right? But if I select them both by clicking and dragging, and I go to this shape mode, which is called Unite, and I click on it, what we see is this becomes one shape. Let's see what else. You can also do things like divide, I'm sorry, trim. So that's also useful sometimes. If I select both and I click trim, oh sorry, not trim. Well, what trim does is the one on top actually kind of cuts out what's below it. So that's why the bottom square did disappear when I did that. But another thing I could do is I could do this, I could select it like that, and I could press this, which I think this is called divide. So we'll look, if I select the center square now and I click delete, there's now a hole in this one. So we basically did like a cookie cutter type of thing. These are very useful, especially when you're doing like custom design work and stuff like that later on. You'll find those to be to your advantage. But that's, I guess, these are kind of trial and error. Like as you get more experience, like you'll be able to use them in such a way that it'll help you accomplish your end goal. Okay, so that's the basic things that I use in terms of what Illustrator provides. We have some more tools over here, but they're kind of self-explanatory, but I'll just go through them real fast just in case we don't have a complete understanding of them. So this is the selection tool. This is the direct selection tool. So that's for like that's for stuff like we have anchor paths in shapes. So if I want to select this point and move it around, that's what that tool is for. This is the magic wand tool. So that helps select like things of a certain color. So I mean, we only have blue here, but if you have an image with multiple colors, you click on it, it'll select everything in the artboard that is that color. This is another selection tool. It's the lasso. It helps you select things again. This is the pen tool, and we see there's several variations of it. Since this is kind of basic, I'm gonna show you. So if I click, I place an anchor point, and then so I'm basically making a shape right now. So if I click again, it makes a line, right? If I click and I drag, then I can make a curved line. And you see it filling in right now. So I can pretty much make any shape I want to. And then to complete the shape, you just close it off at the one that you started with. And then boom, now I have this shape. This is also good for vectorizing. If you're vectorizing something, you'll be using the pen tool a lot. Add anchor point. So again, remember I said that we have these anchor points on here. If you want to make a new anchor point, you just click anywhere on the shape, on the line, and you can add as many anchor points as you want. Again, kind of linking back, I can then manipulate these anchor points with the direct selection tool, which is also A on the keyboard if you want to use it as a shortcut. And those become really effective in making your work much faster because constantly going over here and clicking on it might slow you down a little bit. Okay, you can also delete anchor points by clicking on them with the delete pen tool, or you could just hold shift and click and that'll also do that. A little bit of shortcuts. Okay, text, that's, let me see, did I miss anything else? Oh, convert anchor point. If you click on an anchor point, you can what it does is it changes how you can manipulate it, but you won't really use that too much. Especially in Illustrator, I don't really use it, but it converts your anchor points and it makes them like straight edges, so you don't see like that curving that we get with this one because I converted this one. Let me just show you again. So see, but if I make this one like this, it becomes a corner. That's basically what that does. It takes away like all that give. Oh, another thing you can do with the direct selection tool, well, not with those, but with this one, if you have like a curve, you'll see like these handles come off. You can use those too to kind of play with your shape or whatever you want to do. What I did just now was I pressed Command Z to undo that. So here's all the typing tools. Also, like, pretty basic. Like, if you choose a font here, you choose your size. Well, it's in points. One thing I wanted to cover too is if you go to help and you search units, I like to have everything in inches. So you go units and click on this, and then you can change them as you like. I like to have everything in inches because that's kind of how you're working when you're doing apparel. You don't really measure things in points. Okay, so say I make it 1 inch. Here I select this font, Papyrus. Hello. Okay, great. That's pretty much it. Hello. Okay, let's say we do that, and then we click the direct selection tool. Now I can play with this like a shape, which is cool. I'm just gonna delete all these and clean it up. The rest of these I don't really use. Okay, hang on. Well, actually, here's the line tool. You can make lines with that. That's going to be important for later on. You can make lines, or if you want to make a straight horizontal line, you hold shift, click, and drag. So you click and drag to make lines. But to make it a perfectly horizontal line or vertical line, you hold shift. So I get these perfect lines while I'm holding shift. I'm holding shift down right now and I'm making these lines. And that becomes really important in embroidery, as you will soon see. And then you have, well, on the line tool, I rarely use the arc tool or any of these, but you can play around with them. Rectangle tool, okay, this makes rectangles. Obviously, if you hold down shift, it makes squares. Okay. Rounded rectangle, same thing. If you hold down shift, it makes more proportional. Ellipse, it makes ovals or ellipses. Ellipsi. If you hold down shift, it makes circles. All of these shapes work the same way. Yeah, so you'll use those at your own discretion. These here I don't really use when it comes to the work we do. This is an eyedrop tool, so that basically tells you what color something is. So if I press M, that's the rectangle tool shortcut. And I'm going to flip this just so it's filled like that. Okay. And let's say I'm working on a design. I don't know what color that is. Okay. Well, I just made it red. But let's say I don't know what color that is. I just use the eyedrop tool. I click on it and it'll tell me that it's blue. It'll make this blue. Here, let me make this. Let me show you how it works. So, okay. So I'm going to hang on. Okay, so I'm going to make it like it's no color, okay? So no color is selected in my palette. So I'm going to click here, and then I'll click on the shape, and then boom, it's going to give me the colors that is, because it's blue with the red outline, if you look closely. Another couple of shortcuts, Command or Control plus, zoom in, Command or Control minus, zoom out. If you hold down here, you also get a measuring tool. That's effective when you'll see the information right here. When I click here, hold shift and drag up, it gives me a measurement of how high this object is, and you'll see right there it says 3.479 in that info box. That's just a little useful tool. You can measure horizontal the same way, or you can even measure diagonal and it'll give you both. So that's cool. Okay, and for now the rest of these you don't really want to worry about. Unless if you want to zoom in and zoom out like this, you click once or left click to zoom in, and then to zoom out, right click and zoom out. I like the shortcut better, Command minus or Command plus. Okay, so now that we covered these tools, we covered this a little bit. This is your palette. You can flip the colors like this. This is your fill. This is your stroke. So fill is what's inside the shape. Stroke is the outline. We can increase the stroke here. You'll see that it's red. You can play with the stroke here and here. Again, this is all stuff that you'll probably be using more later, not really at too much of a beginner level. Okay, cool. So there you go. There is a basic overview of these tools and these windows I have here. Okay, so let's start with the basics. So a lot of the stuff you deal with here, you can basically program it with a line, and I'll go into more detail with that. So, all right. So this is your view setting. This is something we'll go over later because you can't view anything unless you start digitizing. And again, we know that digitizing is converting things into DST, stitch files, which can then be used on embroidery machine to stitch. So let's start off with just basic text. This is our color palette. You can also modify that here. You can add different colors, or you could use this color palette, or you could use this color palette, or this color palette. It's completely up to you. So let's just start with blue. Okay, I'm going to select blue, and I'm going to go to my line tool, click, or you can. It's also /. If you do /, it'll give you a line also. Or is it backslash? Sorry, it's backslash. Backslash will give you the line tool too. So I'm going to click, hold shift, drag across the screen. Okay, we have a straight line. So you're probably thinking, how are we going to make this into text? Well, if we go to the path type, this helps us choose whatever kind of path, embroidery path we want to do with this. So let's say I click this. This is going to give me a run stitch. A run stitch is basically just like a straight line stitch. These show you different like data in terms of how it's going to come out. So this shows you where it's going to cut, and the center point, which is represented by that little traffic light. And then the 3D view is going to give you a 3D preview. So this is going to be a straight line across, because that's what a run stitch is. You see, it's just a straight stitch. Okay. Now, if I press the V, and so it selected the object. If I hold Alt and click and drag, it'll duplicate it. That's also an interesting shortcut. So now what we have is we have two lines, and it is centered here. But I'm going to modify that line. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to make it into a steel. So a steel stitch is not just a straight line, but it's kind of zigzagging. So if we look at it in the 3D, we see that a steel is thicker. It's thicker, and when the machine runs it, it's going to be stitching from side to side and filling it up. Rather, a stitch here is just going to be stitching a straight line. So this is going to go like this when it stitches, and this is just going to go straight. Okay. This is a complex fill. This is used when you have shapes usually. So I'm going to make a rectangle, and I'm going to select complex fill, and we'll see that it stitches multiple runs. So you see it's going to go from left to right until it fills in this space. Or, okay, so I'm going to do the trick again. So Alt, click and drag. Now I'm going to make this complex fill with a steel. So this is a complex fill, but now it has a steel border around it. The steel around it. And typically that'll stitch the complex first and then put the border around it afterwards. This is satin pathing, which I'll cover I think in a later video because it's a little more complicated. And then these are some other settings here. If you ever need to convert back to like a line again, you select it and you press this, it'll give you, sorry, not that, this, and it'll convert it back to vector artwork. So see, I'm going to select that and press this. Boom, we have the vector artwork that we started out with. Okay. So, very basic introduction. I'm going to make probably a sub video for each one of these because there's a lot of details that we can go into down here that I really haven't gotten a chance to cover because this is just an introductory video and I don't want to make it too long. So I'm going to hit backslash. I'm going to hit hold shift, click and drag across the screen. There's my line. Okay. So I'm going to go into detail with text because that's a lot of the jobs you'll be doing, especially in retail level embroidery. So I'm going to click here and you're going to see my text. So we're going to be modifying this in this properties box. Okay, so the text, to change what it says, you double click and you type in whatever you want to say. And whenever you're doing this, just make sure the spelling is correct, double check everything, make sure it's how the customer wanted it. I'm just going to write cap swag. And then you're going to click apply to make your changes. Okay, so there it says cap swag. If I go up here, well, here, if you look here, you'll see, if I click this, it shows me where the needle points are going to hit with those black outlines. If I click this, it's going to show me where the trims are going to be, also where the center point is. And if I click this, it'll give me a 3D preview of what that's going to look like stitched. So not too bad, pretty clean. If I want to change the font type, I go to font and then I change the font type. So you can pretty much, you can select any font, pretty standard here. Let's do Old English. Great, and then we look at the 3D preview. Cool. Okay. Let's say the customer wanted it to be 1 inch. There you go, 1 inch. Say they wanted it. And let's look at the preview. Always check the preview because sometimes when you're doing font work, if a size is too big, it might not stitch as well. For example, let's say I'm doing a wide font like bold block, okay? Which actually, this brings up another point. Some fonts only can type in capitals. So let's say we're doing bold block, which is a capital dominant font. So we do it at 1 inch. We see that the stitches appear fine. But if I ramp this up to like 2.5 inches, number one, it's going to be huge, but you're going to see something like this. And the reason for this is because it's too wide. And so what I mean by that is, if you look really close, I just zoomed in, this like lettering is done usually with a satin stitch. And a satin stitch is very similar to the steel one I showed you not too long ago. The points are they jump basically from each side of the letter as they fill in. Okay? And so when you make a letter too big, or any satin stitch too big, it becomes very wide and the stitching as a result becomes very loose. So you want to make sure that before you agree to any sizes, you're definitely sure that it'll come out the way the way the customer kind of wants it, but also just that it'll even come out at all. So for something like this, I would try to keep it probably under 2 inches or so. But you see, even at 2 inches. So if you probably stick with 1.5 inches, you'll be okay. So as you can see here, it's fine. So let's zoom out. But another thing you can do is you can position it inside this selection box. So if we do left, it'll position it to the left. If we do right, center. We had it just now in center, which is pretty good. I like to do fill box, and that really gives you control of how much space you're going to take up. As you see here, the width of this selection is 18 inches, which is way too big if I'm going to put it, let's say, on the front of a hat or something like that. So I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to make it like 5 inches wide. And I'm going to see that it doesn't really look proportionally nice. So I can actually modify the height here to make sure it's exactly what I want. So the height's too big like that, so let's try doing it 1 inch. And we see when we do that, the proportions look a lot more, normal. And we check it and we see that's cool. So even though this says 1.5, I modified the actual shape and it'll stitch in a 1.1 by 5. So I really recommend using the fill box option and make sure that your sizes are as accurate as they can get. This just changes the the shape of that box, the selection box. So if I do this, for example, it'll do that. You will use these. Sometimes customers do request like an arch like that, but I'll probably cover that in a later video because there's some different ways to do that. But this does work. Sometimes it doesn't work as nice as this, and you have to play with it a little bit. But yeah, that's something that's cool too. So I'm just gonna put it back to rectangle. Click apply. Okay, so remember, after each time you make a change, you want to click apply so it actually does go through. Okay, so satin this is the setting of the stitch. You're not really going to change this too much unless in some cases when you are stitching through a thick material, like let's say leather, you're going to double the density, which means make it smaller. So from 0.02 I made it 0.01. And so you saw when I clicked apply, this became a little bit darker. That's because there's going to be more stitches in that space. You only really want to do that if you have a really thick material to make sure that you don't have any empty spaces. Short stitch isn't something we worry about. Satin path really you're not going to worry about. Text we just went over. This was the text option. Text connection. Sometimes when you're doing embroidery, you're going to have like linkages in between the text. And let's say we see linkages here. You don't want linkages because that's going to mean that after it comes off the machine, you're going to have to clean it up. So I just do always trim in that case, and you click apply. And let me choose a different font just so you can really see like the difference that makes. So let me set it back to trim. Go to text. I'm going to just make it, I don't know, what's a different font? Trying to think of a font that actually demonstrates that. Let me do chopsticks. No. Okay. So well, here, let me do this. So I'm gonna do never trim. So you saw that when I clicked apply, those little scissors went away, and now you see linkages. So what's gonna happen in this case is the machine is gonna basically connect the letters, because after it finishes each letter, it's gonna jump to the next one without cutting the thread. So what I like to do is I do always trim, and that makes sure that it's nice and clean for you, so you don't really have to do too much touch-up work after you're done stitching. Underlay, this is important. Each underlay, you'll see when I click it, it'll demonstrate it here, does something a little bit different. The one you'll really be using is parallel. I recommend doing parallel on everything, just to make sure you get a full product, but it doesn't add too much stitch density where you'll have a lot of thread breaks. you want to really use parallel when you're basically anytime you're doing satin. I really recommend it because it gives you a nice clean finish on the lettering. The embroidery looks more full, but it doesn't get so dense in small spaces, especially when you're doing small fonts. It doesn't get so dense that it tears the thread and causes you to replace the thread, which will really slow you down when you're doing especially heavy quantities or whatever you're doing, honestly. Pull composition, very rarely you need this. I'll probably cover this in a separate short video, probably 1-2 minute video. This is just sometimes used when you have stretchy fabrics. You add a percentage. So let's say I make it 105%. You'll see this is going to get a little bit wider, so it just kind of stretches with the material. Again, you probably won't need that, and I'll cover that later in more detail. Overlap, not really something to worry about. Commands aren't really going to be an issue with text, and I'll cover that later on when we get to it. Okay, so there it is. We digitize this text from start to finish. We're going to check it to make sure it's cool. It looks good to me. Now, if for any reason you need to change the color, it doesn't actually matter what color it is here because you're just going to change the color on the machine. Another cool tool is, let's say this is going on the side of a cap. Well, let's say it's going on the side of a cap. Let's just pretend. And usually on the side of a cap, you won't really be doing 1 inch, and definitely not 5 inches wide. So let's just make this 0.6, and so now the width we'll see here is 2.75. So there it is. There's the font. But a lot of times when you do something on the side, the customer wants it as low as possible, but this design is going to center from the middle. So what you want to do is you want to go to the Design Start Stop tool, and you can actually change where it centers from. And because when you do caps, you typically flip it on the machine, you're going to do the opposite on this square. So if you want it from the bottom, you're not going to center from the bottom of the square, you're going to click the top. And so while it does say it's going to center from the top, when you rotate it 180 degrees on the embroidery machine to stitch on a cap, it's going to trace from the center and the bottom of the design, which lets you align it as low as possible and get the most precise placement possible. Yeah, so as you can see, that traffic light went up now, but really when you put it on the machine, it's going to trace from this area right here, and that's going to let you get it as low as possible. And that's a tool that I actually really like. Another tool is this text edit tool. Let's say for some reason your letters are too close together. In this case they're not, but let's say they are. You can manipulate these however you like. You see, let's say I wanted to change this like that. I don't know, for whatever reason. In the 3D preview, that's how it'll come out. So yeah, okay, so now let's say I'm ready to go. I'm all set and I'm happy with my digitizing and I'm ready to export this. So we're going to go here to export. You can also save it. If you save it as an AI file, and I like to mark that it's digitized. In case if you have to save this, let's say it's like a client internal embroidery. Maybe we did it for some reason. You're going to want to save it as a digitized AI file. So I'm going to click Save As. I'm going to say cap. Let me just go to my desktop or something. I'm going to go cap, swag, whatever. And then I usually put digitized. So I know that this isn't a vector Illustrator file. This is a digitized Illustrator file. So that if I need to just edit the digitizing and I don't want to start from the beginning, like if I don't want to start from scratch, I just want to go in here and change some of the settings, I can save it like that. I'm not going to save it because I don't really need this file right now. But when we're ready to stitch it, you're going to do export. You're going to check the format. You might see it like this. This might be how it's displayed. I like to click it down just so I know what I'm working with. You're going to click the format. You're going to go to DST, which is a Tajima stitch file. Tajima stitch files are what we use because our embroidery machine is a Tajima embroidery machine. And then you're going to select the location that you wanted to export to. In this case, I'm just going to, you're probably under devices, since we use Mac, it's going to say like a USB. You're going to select the USB you want and then click export. And then after that, you're just going to look for this title on the embroidery machine, and that's it. So that was a basic overview of Adobe Illustrator CS5 and like to serve our purposes, and also a very basic overview of digitizing simple text in Illustrator. There's going to be more videos to follow that go kind of more in depth into each of these themes, but I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching. Have a great day.